Thank you for joining us for Getting Started with Teams. The meeting will begin in just a moment. So again, welcome. Thank you for joining Getting Started with Teams. My name is Diane Seneschal. I am with Microsoft. And this program is sponsored by New Jersey Office of Information Technology and the Juvenile Justice Commission. And then, of course, we've got Vitalist, our training partner, Ryan Spavlik. For those of you who are familiar with Skype, Teams is the replacement for Skype, but it's much more than purple Skype. It's a collaboration tool that joins together some of the programs that you already know from Microsoft. That would be Outlook, your calendar in Outlook, Word, PowerPoint, and obviously Skype for chatting. But Teams will allow you to chat with your own coworkers. Will allow you to have meetings between your coworkers internally within the OIT tenant, as well as with meetings with external parties. And then you can also share documents internally, as opposed to emailing around to everybody and asking for multiple changes. So today I'm going to turn it over to the JGC folks who will talk about how you create a team.
Thank you, Diane. Before I get started now, I do want to acknowledge that we do have some people from other agencies who are on this training. You should contact your respective help desk to get information on how to create teams for your agency. For the JGC, what you would do is you would send a request to the JGC help desk through your supervisor with the name of the team and also any members that you want on initially. We will set you as the initial owner, so if you don't have the name of who you want originally, part of this training you will learn how you add and remove members. So as the owner, you will be able to modify who is a member of your team after we turn it over to you. And like Diane said, if you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the Q&A and we will answer them. Diane, back to you.
Thanks. Actually, Ryan, take it away.
Sure thing. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Austin. So welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. This is going to be Getting Started with Microsoft Teams. As everyone has already mentioned, my name is Ryan Spavlik, and I will be your presenter for today. Now, I do have some goals in mind for what we plan to cover with our session this afternoon. So we'll be talking primarily about navigating through the team's structured interface, just becoming familiar with the different components of it and where everything is. We'll also want to talk about working with teams and channels. We'll talk about conversations and chats. We'll highlight the difference between the two and what they're used for. We'll talk about creating and joining the different types of meetings that are available in Teams, as well as working with files, tabs, and some of the more powerful collaborative tools that come with Teams. So with that being said, we can just hop right into it. Now, at this point, there's one thing that I'd like to do before I actually jump into a specific conversation about well, the interface. And mostly what I like to do is set up some definitions. Mostly, I want to talk about teams and channels specifically, what they are before we actually get started. I'll be using both of those terms very frequently throughout the presentation. So just to kind of lay that groundwork for us, you can think of teams as being like the basic building block of this application. They're going to be generally very large, but goal-specific groupings of people. Teams, in most cases, are going to be private, meaning they are invitation only. And they'll have a specific goal in mind for what their purpose is. Obviously, I have a few examples here for different teams that I'm a part of. I have a marketing team, which obviously the purpose is to market the company. Sales, which is to increase the number of sales that are had. I also have HR compliance, Project Alpha team, a management team, and some research and development teams. Now, all of these have a particular objective in mind, but you'll also notice that every single one of these teams has a number of subheadings attached to it as well. these are going to be your channels. Channels are where most of your work actually gets done in Teams. Every single channel is going to be a separate space for conversations, for files, for various different resources and important other components relevant to the tasks that you guys are trying to complete with this channel. But really, the main thing to drive home, at least for the moment, is that teams are going to be the top level structure and channels are going to be a substructure below that. They're going to have more focused conversations. They're going to collect resources specifically to the purpose of this channel. And it's a way to just sort of organize and divide the labor that's going into your team or project. But the real takeaway is that teams are top level and channels are all of the sub-levels beneath that team. So with that in mind, let's actually just begin and talking about the actual interface for the application. So there's three major components to it. There is the navigation pane, which is this dark purple swatch you see run along the left side here. There's a dark purple swatch at the top. This is going to be the title bar. And there's also this big white and gray window, which takes up the majority of the space in the application. I refer to this as the content window, but what will actually appear here is going to change depending on where we are inside of the navigation panel. So we want to take a look at those options and see how that changes this view here. One of the very first ones in the list, and we'll just run down and take a look at them here, is going to be the activity feed. So the activity feed is going to allow you to just see precisely what's going on around you in Teams. These are all hyperlinks, so you can click on them and they will attempt to take you to that location in Teams where this notification comes from. You see here, it even will attempt to highlight them so you know specifically what it is notifying you about. Now, the more you're in Teams and the more teams and channels that you are a part of, the more notifications you'll eventually begin to see inside of your activity feed. I don't have a tremendous amount here, but when you do start to see more and more, it's worth knowing that you can actually use this little funnel-shaped icon here. This acts as a filter. So you can look for particular types of notifications or messages from a particular person, or you can simply access this ellipse here, and it gives you just some quick choices for things you may want to filter for. Now, aside from being able to show you what's going on around you in Teams, there is a secondary function of the activity feed as well. So if you go through and you click the little drop-down arrow next to this feed option here, not only do you have a choice for what's going on around you in Teams, but you also have a choice for a complete list of your own activity inside of Teams. So as you can see here, this is much like the previous list. These are all functional hyperlinks, so I can navigate to any one of these. And you see it takes me directly to their position inside of Teams. So if I need to recall what I said in a previous message, if I have to track down where I posted a file or anything else along those lines, then all of that can just be reclaimed from here. And of course, this is a slightly more robust list, so if I need to apply filters, the same button is actually in place for filtering my feed as well. Next, we have the actual chat tab. So this is going to be where all of your private chats live inside of Teams, whether they're one-on-one private chats as you see here, whether they are group chats, or even records of chats from a meeting, let's say. Any of those things will all appear in this feed for you to access, to reflect on, and work through later. Next, we have the actual Teams pane. So this will be familiar. We've already spent a few moments in here, but this is going to be probably where most of you spend the majority of your time in this application. This is going to give you access to all of your teams and channels, and by extension, this is going to give you access to all the conversations attached to these teams, all the files that's attached to them, and any other types of resources, quick links, tools, or anything that might be tied to your team. Next, we have the calendar tab here, and just a neat little fact about the calendar section here. So this calendar and Teams in general is linked up with Office 365 and with Outlook. So anything that you do or add to this calendar will also be added to your Outlook calendar, and vice versa. Anything you add to your Outlook calendar will also sync over and be added to this Teams calendar. So it's possible to manage either or calendar directly from your preferred interface. Now, we'll come back around and talk about the different types of meetings and options that are available in Teams, but for now, we're just going to want to keep going with the interface stuff. So I'm going to skip over calls. We're going to move directly into files. Now, the files view here, this is basically just going to give you a list of, unsurprisingly, the files that you have access to in Teams. Now, by default, this is going to load you into a recent view, meaning it's just going to show you documents in order of their modified by date. So whatever was most recently modified that you have access to will appear at the top of the list, and whatever was previously modified will just kind of appear further down the list. Next, you have the actual Teams view. This is still looking at many of the same files, but this is going to be slightly more robust. It's going to not sort them by date modified, although that is a particular option that you have available. It's just going to show you, again, the different files with which you have access to in Teams. There's also a view for downloads. So if you do find yourself downloading any files, you'll find that a list of what you have downloaded gets compiled here. So, if you're submitting information to a third party, or if you have to grab a copy of a finished template to use, you'll be able to quickly access them from here. Now, another advantage of Teams is, again, linking back to its Office 365 integration. So Teams does tie in with your OneDrive for Business account. So if you have been using OneDrive for Business previously, it's actually very simple to pull files from that location and get them into Teams. And that about covers the specifics of the navigation pane. There's always a few more options there to cover, but I think at this point I'm going to want to jump into the title bar along the top here. So there are a few controls that are worth going over. We're going to start with these in the left corner here. These are just going to be a back and a forward arrow in Teams. They behave similarly to a back or forward arrow inside of a web browser, in that they'll just take you a single page back in your view of the application. Now, of course, you can go in either or direction. You can see here it takes you between tabs of the navigation pane. If you are clicking through Teams and channels or through different chats, it'll take you through each one of those in turn, going all the way back up to the activity feed itself. I just want to let you guys know, before we move on to the next button, that these do not function as an undo or a redo button. If you submit a message to the wrong place, or you upload the wrong version of a file, you can't quickly jump back 5 pages and hope that it gets undone. They don't work like that. This will only change your view. If you need to remove something because it's in the wrong place, you have to manually do that. But enough about those. So we want to move on to the next button here. This is going to be the new chat item. Looks like a pencil writing on a piece of paper. So I can, of course, type in some names here for people who I have not spoken to yet. And you can see here that when you have not ever spoken to someone, you see this little image appear here. It says, you're starting a new conversation. Type your first message below. So I can begin conversing with my colleague Kyren, but I want to show something else that's interesting about this particular feature, which is if I press this button again, and I actually do a search for someone who I have spoken to before, we're going to see something a little bit different. You see here that when I type in my colleague Sue's name, it pulls up my full conversation history with Sue. So you can use this button either to begin new messages with new people, or you can use it to recall an existing conversation history that you have access to. Either one works fine. Next, you have the little search option in the top here. I'm going to do a quick search just for the word training. Now you'll see here in this little left column that there's 3 different types of searches that Teams does. It does a search through messages, it does a search for people, and it also does a search for files. Now, the neat thing about these types of searches is that they will pull back quite a few responses. There's a lot of places for Teams to look through. So you actually do have filters in place to help you refine the results that it's going to pull back. Of course, when looking at messages, you can look for messages just from a particular person. You can also go through and you can specify what type of messages you're looking for, whether you want to do just your private chat messages, or if you want to look through messages that take place in Teams and channels, or both. You can specify. And then there are additional controls for the subject of the message. You can set a date and time criteria as well. If you're looking for messages that did take place in Teams or channels, you can specify a specific team and channel that you want to use, and so on. Now, there are also searches for people. Unfortunately, I don't know anyone with the name training in my organization, so we'll come back to this in just a second. But I want to take a look at files. So files are kind of interesting in Teams, mostly because when you perform a search through them, you'll notice that despite the fact that I did a search for the term training, only 1 out of the 7 files that appears here actually seems to be directly related to training. And why is that? Because Teams isn't only looking at the names of these files when it does a search, it looks at the properties of those files as well as the content of those files to see if it's in any way relevant to our search criteria. So even though there's only one document named training here, the rest of them will relate in some capacity. Now, of course, this does mean, again, that you may end up with more results than you bargained for. So there are additional filters to be applied here. You can, of course, specify what team you are looking for these files from. You can specify the file type you're searching for. And if you happen to know who the person was that last edited this file, you'd actually be able to search for files that have been modified specifically by that person and see what they've been working on. Now, as far as people go, if I go ahead and just type in John here, you'll see I can perform a search for this name if I don't see the results pop up, although this is going to provide some quick suggestion based on who is in your address book that you may be searching for. And if I hop over to people, you'll see the same list of suggestions appear. If anyone else with the name John, Jonathan, Johan, and so on would appear, they would be added to the list, but I just have these 5. You'll notice there are no filters, though, when searching for people. You'll just be searching by name. Now, the final option that I want to touch on in regards to interface and other types of controls is going to be this button over here in the top right-hand corner. In my case, it has my initials. For you, it may have a profile picture. But there's a number of really important items that I think we want to cover here. It's got everything from the sign out option to downloading the mobile app to Zoom controls, your actual availability settings, and even the in-application settings. So there's 2 major areas of the application settings that I like to go over. The first one is going to be notifications, and the second one will be devices. I do encourage all of you to take a look at the different settings that are inside of the application, but let's harp on these 2 for just a moment. So notifications is going to allow you to go through and just to customize how Teams is going to reach out to you when it has a notification for you. You can see here there are a couple of different categories to look at, as well as a couple of different options in each category to choose from. Each option will have between 3 to 5 different choices for how it will elect to reach out to you. So you can see here, under messages, for replies to conversations that I started. So if I go through into one of my channels and I say, good morning, everybody, do I really need a high priority notification every time someone responds to something like that? Not necessarily. And if I know that that's mostly what I'm doing with my conversations, maybe I don't want to receive these type of notifications at all. So I can come in and I can say, okay, anyone who replies to anything that I say, I don't really need to know about. I'm going to turn this off. Or maybe if that feels a little extreme, I can then say, well, maybe I'll just have it show in my activity feed. So I know when it happens, but I don't necessarily need an email about it. On the other hand, you may be in a position where you have to absolutely respond to everything somebody says in Teams, whether you're answering questions about a project or using this as some kind of support tool. Either way, you may decide that really you need an even higher priority type of notification. You need a banner pop-out message, but you need more than that. You need an email as well, just to really make sure that it grabs your attention whenever something like this comes in. Now, in my case, I really do not want to receive an email every time someone replies to something that I say. So I'm just going to leave this the way it is, but just know that it is customizable. So next, we're going to move into the device settings. So device settings is basically going to be a space in the application where you can come in and you can choose what audio or video device you're going to be using in Teams. So if you're getting ready to join a meeting and maybe you have a laptop you're set up with to work from home, it's got a built-in speaker, a built-in microphone with it, and you go ahead and you go try to join your meeting, but you realize the sound quality is not very good. So what you can do instead is take that replacement or alternative headset or microphone, webcam, whatever it is that you have, you plug it into the laptop, you can come into this section of Teams, you can select the corresponding drop-down box, and you can adjust it to fit the device that you prefer. There's also going to be an option to test all of your devices in this setting as well. And aside from that particular note, I also feel the need to mention this section of the settings because it does appear throughout the application in other places. But we'll touch on that as we get closer to those sections of our discussion. Now, with all that in mind, that's going to cover the majority of what I wanted to talk about in terms of the interface and the structure of teams. So now we'll want to move into talking about working with teams and channels. Now, I'm aware we may have a slight mix in terms of organizations that are with us in this session today. So in general, as a rule of thumb, in my experience with NJGov, is that you guys will have to reach out to your help desk to request that a team be made for you. So keep that in mind. That may vary, but by and large, that's going to be the primary method for obtaining a team. So let's assume that you've gone through, you've spoken to your help desk, they've already set you up with a brand new team, and right now you're the only person inside of the team. It's kind of blank, there's not a lot of content, not a lot of channels. How do you actually manage that team? How do you get new members? How do you kind of deal with all of this? So I have this RDA team, which is not exactly a new team, but it's one that I am the owner of, and I think it will work well as a demonstration for those of you who will also own teams. Actually, before I get into this, I just want to make one more quick note about something. When you do request for a team to be made, I always advise everyone who attends my sessions, make sure that you have multiple owners listed. It doesn't have to be, 5 or more, but you want to have at least 2 to 3 owners for your team in the event that something happens to the original owner, whether they retire, whether they shift positions and maybe move into a different division or department. Anything along those lines you want to be able to future-proof your team for. Because the owner of your team is going to be the one who... Yes, hello?
This is Austin. Something I want to mention with the team owners. When the ownership is turned over to you, you'll notice a owner in there called JJC Sync Service. That is put in there for just this purpose, so that the teams always have an owner that the JJC can access. So we do ask the local owners to keep that in the team ownership.
Perfect. So you guys are already thinking ahead. Excellent. So that's good to know. But still, I would keep that note in mind because owners are going to be the ones who are going to be able to add new members to the team. They're going to be the ones who set up permissions for the team. And generally, they're going to have the largest degree of control. So with that out of the way, let's actually just move directly into talking about adding new members to a team. So adding new members to the team is going to be the same largely for everyone. All you have to do is click on the ellipse next to a team name for any team name realistically, and you'll see the option to add members to that team appear. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hit add member over RDA, and then I can go in and I can just begin typing in my colleagues' names. It'll auto-complete, and then I can send out invitations for them and get them added up to this team. Now, this works for me in this case because I am the owner of the RDA team. Now, I want to show you guys what it looks like when you try to add a member to your team as someone who is not an owner. So you see here that this is going to do the same thing. So if I go ahead and I type in Jay's name, but he's not a member of this team, you'll notice that the box is different. It says I can type a name or email, and then I can send the request to the team owner. So this isn't really me directly adding this person to the team at this point because I am a member of the team, but this is going to be a way that I can send information to the team owners and say, hey, this person should probably be a part of our team. They're related to our project. And then from there, the owner can go into the team and actually accept that request, get them added into the team. So those are going to be your primary methods for getting people into a team. But there are additional questions as well, because when you create a brand new team, you're only going to have one channel by default. It is going to be the general channel. Every single team is going to have a general channel by default. So you can choose to work from just this one singular channel, or of course you can go in and add more and help you further divide up your responsibilities, your documents, and so on. The best way to add a channel to a team is, of course, to go in and hit the Add Channel button from the ellipse next to the team name. So it's going to ask me what I want to name my channel. I'm just going to call it Publications here. I'm going to leave every other setting at its default at the moment. And we're going to go ahead and we are going to just add this channel. And then once we're done, we're greeted with a brand new completely blank channel that appears inside of my RDA feed. So you can have as few or as many channels as you want. One thing that I do want to highlight while we are here looking at this is what a brand new default channel looks like. You'll see that there's currently no conversations, no items posted, but it does come with 3 tabs at the top, a section for posts, a section for files, and a section for wiki as well. Every single channel is going to have it's going to have all 3 of these by default, and then you can choose to add in additional tabs as you need to. Now, another thing that you may need to do, especially if you are, owning or managing a team, is going to be actually removing channels. Whether your project ships out of that phase, or you find that the purpose of it's a bit redundant compared to stuff that you guys have already set up. There are a lot of reasons why you may choose to delete a channel, but we're going to want to ask ourselves, how do you actually do it? So rather than going into the ellipse next to the team name, if you mouse over the name of a channel, you'll see that an ellipse also appears for these. So we can access that ellipse option, and then from here, we can opt to delete this channel. Now, it's going to give us this dialog box. It's going to say, are you sure you want to delete the channel Publications from this team? All conversations will be deleted, but your files will still be accessible here. And I'm not going to click this link because it's not super important for what we'll be covering today. But just know that if you do delete a channel, whether it's on purpose or it's by accident, you'll still have access to anything that was stored inside of the Files tab here. But anything that was in the Post section will not be retrievable. So just keep that in mind. Files will be retrievable, posts will not after the channel's been removed. Okay. Now, I think we're going to want to also talk about actually managing the team's interface here. Now, as you can see, for the purposes of my demonstration today, I have everything collapsed so it looks nice and neat. But when you have a fully expanded view of Teams and you're just kind of getting into it for the first time, it's very easy for this to become very messy. It can become a little difficult to look at and to navigate through, especially if your teams have similar names or the channels themselves have similar names. So what you can actually do is go in, you can select the ellipse next to a channel name. And these top 3 options are going to be very important controls for dealing with and navigating through Teams. So we have the option to hide a channel or to pin the channel. You can see here I actually already have a list of 5 hidden channels inside of marketing, which I can expand out and you can see the full list that I have. Now, the thing about hiding channels or hiding teams or anything along those lines is that it doesn't prevent you from actually accessing any of the resources here. I can still go into our 2020 budget team here. I can grab any important piece of documentation or anything else realistically. I can go into sales report and do pretty much exactly the same thing. These don't really in any way prevent you from accessing anything. It just controls the notifications and how things appear inside of your feed. Now, you'll notice that this is italicized, so when I click out of this channel here, it's going to actually collapse back into the list of hidden channels. So we can go through and we can just add one more to that with our email campaigns option. And you can see that it just slowly decreases the number of items that appear inside of this list. Now, at any time, I can select this list again. I can mouse over any important channels, and I can simply opt to show those again. So we can pull our email campaigns back, and then we can go into the list, and we can pull sales reports back. Oops. Go ahead and show that. Now, you can actually do the same exact thing for teams as well. So you can actually click the ellipse next to a team name, and you can hide the team itself. This will fall into your hidden teams list here. So you can see I have a couple of those as well. So if there's a team that you really just don't use frequently, but you have to be a part of it, that is something that you could potentially leverage. Now, aside from that, if you have particularly active channels, and maybe these are channels that you're not necessarily using very frequently, you can also come in and rather than just hiding or pinning the important channels, you can actually go in and select channel notifications. And much like the in-application settings, Teams will let you specify how each channel is allowed to notify you. So you can come in and say that, every time this channel makes a new post, I really need to know about it. This is going to be the most important channel for me. Let me go ahead and set this to the highest possible priority. Or the reverse could also be true. It's a channel that everyone kind of talks a little bit too much, and you don't really need most of the information that they're talking about. So you don't really need to know every single time a new post comes up. You can also reflect or make your settings reflect that reality as well. And when you combine those together, it just allows for a large degree of customization when it comes to your teams and your channels. But I think at this point, we're going to want to move into a conversation specifically about, well, chats and conversation. So the first thing we'll probably have to outline is exactly what the difference is between the two. So what is a conversation in Teams? Basically, a conversation is going to be any item that shows up in the post section for a team or a channel. So any files that get posted, any conversation pieces, any meeting updates, any tabs that get created, any hyperlinks that get posted, all of these things are considered conversations. Now, there are a couple of things to note about conversations specifically. Well, one by one. The big one for me is going to be that conversations are threaded. What it means is that single new post that appears here as its own self-contained box here. You'll notice that they have a date and a timestamp for when that post arrives. Are also going to be sorted chronologically. So the farther up you go, the further back in time you're going. Conversation history is also persistent. So while I say that this goes pretty far back, I can actually go all the way back to the original founding of the team, as you see here. I can look at all the posts for the entire history of this channel's existence. And I can do this for any channel that I'm up. Now, one other thing to note is replies are a bit unique in terms of the fact that they're not really going to be in separate boxes. They're just going to appear directly under the post that they're replying to. So since these are threaded, this just makes it very easy to see exactly who's replying to who, and it helps you keep your conversations organized. So let's contrast this with our view of chats. So chats, aside from the fact that they never take place inside of a channel or a team, they also have their own tab in the navigation pane, as we've mentioned. And this is where they're going to be living. So I'm going to go ahead and just pull up one chat that I have. And you can see things here. The first one is that this is also persistent, so it keeps track of the full history that I have for conversing with anybody here. They also have a date and a timestamp, much like conversation pieces, so I know exactly when they happened. They are also sorted chronologically, so the further up I go, the further back in time that we go. And of course, the chat history is also persistent. So anything that I send to someone via a private message, or if I am participating in a group chat, all of that is also stored indefinitely. I can refer back to it at any given time, and it's also subject to e-discovery. A couple of things that separate chats and conversations. You'll notice, for one, these are not threaded. Even inside of group chats, they're not really threaded. It's just going to be the standard kind of chat log appearance here. So if you do have a large number of people in a singular group chat, it can be a bit difficult to keep track of who is directly speaking to who, but it's usually not a major problem. Now, one thing that I do like to mention about chats is that while I say they're private, what I really mean is that there's no way for other people inside of Teams to come through and see what it is that you're talking about with your colleagues. In the same way that I can go in and hop into one of my teams, hop in a channel and see that Chris scheduled a meeting for earlier today. Do any type of equivalent that would allow me to see private chats. They are separate. There's no way for me to dig through other people's chats. So that's one of the big separating details of the two. Now, there are a couple of things that I want to note about using chats. Specifically, we're going to want to talk about drawing attention to them as well as actually editing chats after they've been sent out. So what you can do is you can actually type an @ and then you can begin typing in someone's name here. So of course, I'm only speaking to Sue, so it's going to be the only suggestion I can really use. However, if I go into a team that I'm a part of, I can type the @ and I can type anyone's name who is a member of this team. And I can do basically the same thing. What this will do is basically just send them a notification saying that I need their attention in this section of the application. There's something that they need to take a look at. Now then, you actually can place mentions to channels as well. So I can say @general, press tab, and now everyone who is a member of the general channel will receive a notification. And I can also do the same thing for the full team itself. And this is just going to allow you to notify every member of your team that there is something important going on. I see this deployed most frequently when it comes to announcements for drawing attention to the announcement itself. But be aware of this. The other thing to kind of keep in mind is your ability to react as well as edit and delete your own messages in Teams. So when you mouse over a message, any type of message, you'll see that this React menu appears. Now you can of course use this as is and let people know how you feel about their messages. But what this will also allow you to do is access quite a few alternative options. So if I go through and I hit this ellipse here next to my Reacts, this is going to give me the ability to delete messages, edit newer messages, save any type of important announcement or other item that I want to refer back to later. And we can take a look, and this is going to be the same not only in private chats, but also in conversations inside of a channel or team. You can see here that I can select the little ellipse to the right. I can go ahead and I can edit this from saying sample text to Chris knows how to hold a meeting. Realistically, I probably could have added that as a reply directly to his post, but I think this illustrates our point. Now, considering it is a little bit silly to just have something edited that could have been a reply, we may also want to go through, copy this over and then get rid of the actual post and reply directly to what he said. So of course I can go in, hit that little ellipse, and then just hit the delete option. And no one else in the chat will be able to see this message. Okay. So that's to cover most of what I wanted to address in conversations and chats. So I think now we'll want to move into about files and tabs. Let's go ahead. We're going to hop into our RDA team here. We're going to talk about the different method you guys have for actually in files into Teams. So there's a few different ways that you can do this. One of the more straightforward ones is just to go into the Files tab for the channel where you want to upload a file to. You simply hit the Upload button, and this is going to pull up your File Explorer. It's going to let you grab files from anywhere you can really navigate to using this utility. Now, this is just one method for getting files into Teams. Another method, and one that has a larger selection of choices for where we can pull files from, is actually going to be this little attach a paperclip icon. So having a conversation about a file will actually get that file added into the Files tab for Teams. So you see here I can go into OneDrive, and I have, let's do project files. All right. We'll just do Sue's resource pack here. We'll upload a copy of this file. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm actually attaching a file directly from my OneDrive for Business account. I can also grab files from other teams and other channels that I'm a part of if I need to. Or again, I can just default to using my File Explorer if I still want to upload a file but have a conversation attached to it. But regardless of how we ultimately choose or what we decide to say about this particular file, I'm just going to go ahead and send it over. You can see that it does get added as a conversation. Now, if I go into the Files tab, this is also going to appear inside of the Files section. So this is yet another way you can get files into Teams. But there is a third option. You'll see to the left of Upload, there is also the option to add new files into Teams. So we can select this, and this will give us a choice between the various different types of Office files we have available. In our case, let's just go ahead and open up, and we'll just call this April attendance. So it's loading up the document now. What's really neat about this is you'll notice is it hasn't actually left the Teams interface. We still have the navigation pane, we still have the title bar, but we actually have the ability now to go through and begin adding information related to the attendance for today. So obviously I can write in my own name, but there are some things to be said about editing a file inside of Teams. While it is impressive, it may not always be your preferred method, especially when it comes to Excel. Many of you may have like custom add-ins, or maybe you have some niche ribbons or tabs within your ribbon that you don't see here that you need access to finish your work. So you don't have to necessarily use the Teams interface to edit these files. You'll see here there is actually a button to open in Desktop app directly. So you can actually pretty freely switch between the Teams interface, Excel Online, and Excel for the desktop when dealing with files inside of Teams, and be able to edit pretty seamlessly between all of them. Your changes will save back and forth. Any type of changes you make in one location will ultimately save to the other, as you can see here. The content that I submitted in the Teams interface is also going to appear in my desktop interface as well. So we'll go ahead, we'll resume editing here as well. And one of the other things that I want to demonstrate, it may take a second for it to connect, is going to be something called co-authoring. You can see it does snap in there. This is just going to allow us to begin editing our documents simultaneously. This is a very powerful tool. This is an advantage of the Vitalist SharePoint, or not Vitalist, excuse me. Sorry, the Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint systems will all allow you to leverage this feature. So previously, if you guys had been working on files collaboratively, especially in a network environment, I'm sure many of you have run into problems when trying to access files simultaneously. Many of you have probably seen the error message saying that this file is locked by user X, Y, or Z, and that they're going to have to, they're basically going to have to wait until they're done making their changes and they're out of the file before you'll be able to then enter and make changes of your own. Clearly, this is no longer an issue. I can come in here and I can begin saying, okay, well, here's my name. You can see in the actual Teams interface, there's a little ellipse signifying that I am actually actively editing the cell. You can mouse over the little ellipse there. It tells you who is inside of the cell. You can see that it is also color coordinated. Now, in my case, I just have it open on the same account in two different windows, so it's not going to be wildly different. But this is going to be an easy way to visually distinguish who is where in the document, and you can tell specifically who that person is. Now, if I go through and actually press Enter in my Excel window here, you can see how quickly it updated over for the Teams section. But if I go through, I'm going to have to click out of the cell. And again, if I go ahead and just hit Enter, you can see how quickly it updates in the Teams interface in the background there. Now we're going to back out of this in the Teams section for one. This will stop the co-authoring in just a moment here. Now, that is an extremely powerful feature, but there are others that do come as a perk, basically, of using this particular type of environment. So aside from co-authoring, you also have access to something called the version history. And what the version history does is it basically just keeps track of who has been inside of your document making changes and when that was. So there's multiple different ways you can access the version history. I am going to show you one way, which you can do from the desktop version of Office. When you have one of these files, again, in Teams, SharePoint, or OneDrive, this box up here in the top left will become interactable. This will allow you to change the name of the file. You can also change the location where that file is stored. And of course, we get access to that all-important version history. So you can see here that there are 3 major versions of this document. The first one is when I created the document. The second one is when I opened it in my desktop version. And the third one's going to be when we actually wrote my name on here a couple of times. But you can see that there is a specific timestamp. It tells me the exact date and the exact time when I went through and modified the document. It has my name attached to it. It grabs it from my account info. So you'll know precisely who was in your document and when. Now, this is especially helpful when dealing with colleagues who perhaps make unsolicited changes to your document. And rather than having to go through and clean up after them and re-modify everything to make sure it's back to the way it was, and just kind of wasting tons of time doing that, you would be able to come in and say, all right, well, I have this version from before Ryan came and messed everything up. So I can go ahead and open this. And you can see the difference between the two. Of course, it's just 1 line of my name versus 2 lines of my name. But if this were a larger document, it would allow us to then at this point choose to restore this and make this the acting version of this document. Or I can do something a little bit different, and I can create a copy of this file with this version and create a sort of a branching division between these 2 documents. So there's a lot of ways you can really use this feature, but it is another powerful advantage of using this environment. Now I'm going to go ahead and close the previous version of this document. I think I'm going to go ahead and close the desktop version as well. Now, that is a lot of what I intended to talk about with regards to files. So I think we will want to take just a brief second to mention tabs. As I said earlier, there are 3 tabs that will always appear in every channel by default, but you do have the option of also inserting new tabs as well. You could do that at any given time by using this little plus sign at the top. And this will give you a multitude of different choices for tabs that you may choose to integrate. You may not have access to all the ones that you see here on my screen because I have a different type of license, so to speak, which gives me access to a few more than government cloud users would be able to get, but many of these will be rolled out in time. I won't go too in-depth with the different options that are available, but just know that you can go through, you can customize tabs, you can add additional pieces of functionality, you can pin important and critical documents to the top of your team as you see here. We have our design examples document for everyone who is doing research. They'll be able to look at this document and say, okay, this will be the template for all future designs for our research proposals going forward. We have information for the document library attached to project development and so on. Now, with all that said and done, I think now is a good time to move away from files, to move away from tabs, and talk about the last topic for today, which is going to be the different types of meetings that are available in Teams. Let's hop into the calendar here in the navigation pane. And realistically, we're going to want to know that there are 2 types of meetings in Teams. They happen to correspond with the 2 buttons that exist here in the top right-hand corner. We have the ability to schedule a new meeting, as you can see from the tooltip when we mouse over this here. And we'll also have the ability to create a new private meeting as well. So I can either press the purple button here, or I can just click on an open spot in my calendar. It'll do the same exact thing. It'll bring up the same interface. This is going to be the interface for scheduling a meeting. Now, this is pretty straightforward. This is similar to scheduling a meeting in Outlook. It's got many of the same fields in terms of title, attendees, both optional and mandatory. You have date and time settings. You can specify if this is an all-day event or if this is a recurring event. You do have one field here that is unique to Teams. This is going to set the location of the meeting as a team or channel. Well, maybe not location, but the destination as a team or channel. So if anything happens, as soon as this meeting date rolls around, we're going to see a post go live inside of that channel, just indicating that the meeting is now ongoing and showing everyone in the channel that perhaps they should be participating in this. So in the event where, people perhaps don't realize what time it is, or they didn't get the original set of invitations, they would still be able to view and join information about the meeting from that post. There is also the scheduling assistant tool, which is always worth mentioning. This is something, again, that Teams gets from Outlook. So I can, of course, go in and I can just grab some of my colleagues here, and we can kind of compare schedules. So if you have access to their calendar, you should have access to this FreeBusy information as well. And it's just going to be a tool that lets you see when the best time to have your meetings is. Now, if you have more than 3 people that you want to invite to a meeting, some of you may have teams upwards of 30 or more, then this may not be the best method for understanding availability, mostly because we personally don't want to go through and look at 20 different bar charts here and try and figure out what individual time slot fits best for everyone. So Teams actually does have a tool for that. It's got this little suggested box right here underneath of the date and time section. So once you have your attendees in place, it will look through the same FreeBusy information you see here represented in the scheduling assistant, and it'll actually suggest a time intelligently based on everyone's availability. So you can be confident that when you see one of these suggestions, they're going to be a good time to host your meeting. You can simply click on them and it'll go ahead and adjust the time for you automatically. The same suggested box will also appear under the date and time section right here. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to actually discard this invitation here, because we'll want to take a look at the other type of meeting that is available. We're going to want to take a look at the impromptu meetings or the Meet Now options. Now, of course, I can go through and I can simply press this button and initiate a private meeting from here, but there are other methods for initiating private meetings as well that we'll want to talk about. So aside from the calendar, you can also go into your chat section. You can access your various different private chats, and you can take a look in the top right here. You'll notice that there are 2 buttons, normally 3, that are purple. Every single one of these buttons acts as a impromptu meeting option. The camera will represent a impromptu video conference. The phone will represent an impromptu audio call. And this 3rd button is for initiating screen sharing. So these are other methods. Of course, you can also come directly into a team or a channel itself, and you can try to host a meeting here. So one of the buttons down here at the bottom you'll see, it looks exactly like the Meet Now symbol, the little camera inside of a circle that we see here. So if we go back into our team in question and say, okay, press the button here, it's going to go through and initiate an afternoon meeting for us. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to meet now, and we'll actually take a look at the interface for a meeting in Teams. So the actual controls for the meeting are pretty simple. It's going to be this bar right down here at the bottom. We'll want to take a look at the different buttons and what they actually do. So this very first one on the left, it's pretty straightforward. This is just a timer. This is just going to tell you how long the meeting's been going on for. Not much else to say really about this. But the next 2 buttons, these are going to be toggle controls. So this is what's going to allow you to mute and unmute yourself in a Teams meeting, as well as display and hide your camera feed inside of a meeting. So if you join in and you realize that you have a lot of background noise right now, you don't want to expose everyone to all that noise. You can come in and quickly press this button here, and it will mute you. Or likewise, if you're getting ready to join a meeting first thing in the morning, you're still working from home, you haven't put on your face yet, and you don't want everyone to see you like that, you can come in and you can very quickly press this option and it'll disable your webcam. You can also simply press it again and it'll re-enable it when the time comes. A third option here, this is going to be the screen share control. So much like screen sharing from a private chat, this will give you access to share your screen with everyone inside of the meeting. So just 2 quick notes about this. Depending on what your goal is for your screen share, you want to be careful what option you choose. If you choose to share your entire desktop, as you see here, what that'll mean is that everyone in the meeting sees everything that goes on your desktop. If you're trying to show them one document and you pull an email over top of that document while everyone's reading it, they're going to start reading your email instead. They're going to see that. If you minimize that document and you have a web page behind it, everyone's going to see what's on that web page. The desktop capture is going to capture everything that goes on the desktop. Now, if you want a more limited sharing experience, and same idea, you're trying to share a Word document with some of your colleagues, if you share just the window that Word document's contained in, everyone in the meeting will only see the content of that window, regardless of if you minimize it, regardless of if you overlay a web page on top of it, they won't see it. They'll just see the content of that window. So keep that in mind. Now, we'll also want to hit the More Actions option here. This will give us access to, well, a lot more actions. There's only 2 items in here that I am really concerned with explaining. Many of them are a bit self-explanatory, but the first one's going to be the Show Device Settings button. Again, this is a throwback to an hour ago when we were talking about the in-device settings. So this is, again, going to be a space where you can come in, you can change your audio and video input and output devices. You can do some minor tests for them if they're plugged in, just to make sure everything's working. So if you are joining a meeting and people can't hear you or you can't hear them and you're the odd one out, you can come in here and you can try and play around with your different devices, see if you can get it to work. The other option is going to be the Start Recording option. So we'll give this a second here. You can see that a big purple banner appears along the top of my screen, or excuse me, yeah, on the top of my screen here. It says, "You're recording, let everyone know that they're being recorded." One of these banners will appear for everybody inside of the meeting. The meeting will also announce when it has begun recording. So what happens when you record? Pretty much anything that goes on in the meeting, any audio, any video, any screen sharing, all of it. It'll all be captured and recorded. So when you're done with your meeting, everything's wrapping up, and you need to stop the recording, you can actually click the same ellipse. You go to the same option that started the recording, but it'll be replaced with stop. Go ahead, we hit stop recording. And you'll see that I get a new banner along the top here. It says that a recording is being saved. Once the recording is processed and saved into Microsoft Stream, it'll be added to the meeting chat. So what does that mean exactly? We'll go ahead and dismiss this banner, and we'll take a look at the meeting chat. It happens to be the very next button in line directly after the ellipse. So this is just your standard meeting chat item. You can basically just submit messages here like you would anywhere else in Teams. I'm going to pat myself on the back for the meeting that I had with myself. And you can also, of course, do things like format your text if you need to with your standard text controls. You can attach files. If the presenter forgot something for their presentation, you can send it over to them this way and also distribute it to everyone in the chat. You can use fun stuff if you need to, and so on. You'll also notice at the top here that there is the actual placeholder. Once our recording is done being processed, that'll be replaced with the actual recording itself, so people will be able to access that. And then finally, we have the participant pane. So this is going to give you the full list of everyone who's inside of the meeting. Obviously, it's just me in this case. However, I could go through using this box at the top here, and I could invite some of my colleagues into this meeting. Or I can hit this little copy join info link here on the side. This will create a hyperlink that will allow people to automatically join the meeting. And then I can distribute this as far as I need to, whether I do that via instant message, email, or embedding this hyperlink inside of a document I plan to distribute. All these things will work as this is just a standard hyperlink. Now, this is also going to be the pane where you can control different aspects of the meeting. So if you're an organizer, as you can see here that I am, if I have any attendees and they're being loud or disruptive or anything else, I'll have the ability to click the little microphone or the ellipse next to their name. I can mute them. I can even outright remove them from the meeting if I have to. Organizers will have that power in this section. And finally, the last button here, that's going to be the hang up option. But before I do that, I want to demonstrate something very quickly. You see here that inside of our team, we have this big purple banner, basically just indicating that the meeting's going on right now. It has the name of the meeting, how long it's been going on for, and who is inside. It'll also give you the button to join directly. you'll see inside of the list of channels here on the side that there's the Meet Now icon next to this channel, so everyone who's a member of this team can see this and knows that there's a meeting going on in that channel. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to hang up this meeting. That's going to change there in just a second. You can see here it loses all that information, just switches over to a white meeting. But what's really interesting about meetings that occur inside of a channel is that the entirety of the meeting chat actually does get transcribed as a reply to the initial meeting. And this is probably one of my favorite ways to have meetings in Teams for that reason, because it means that even if my colleagues miss out and they can't attend our meeting for whatever reason, they'll still have access to all our resources, all our conversations, and even our recordings as well. Now, at this point, I think that I am actually pretty close to done for what we want to cover. So let's review. So we talked about navigating through the team structure and interface, just becoming familiar about where everything is stored in the app. We wanted to talk about working with teams and channels, which I think we got to pretty adequately. We also talked about conversations and chats, kind of understanding the difference between the two, and wondering how we can use them. We talked about creating and joining the different types of meetings that are available in Teams. And we also talked about working with files and tabs inside of Teams. And at this point, I'd like to open it up. If you guys have any remaining questions, feel free to ask them. We will do our best to answer your questions as they come in. But I'd also like to say thank you for attending this training session. If you'd like to offer any feedback, I'll provide a survey link in the announcement section of the Q&A. But for now, I'd like to just turn it back over to Austin or Diane for any kind of closing remarks and any other things that they would like to cover with us today.
Thank you, Austin. For those who are JJC team members, can you offer some guidance once again on how to get a team made?
Thank you, Diane. So yes, really, it's send the request to the JJC Help Desk through your supervisor with the name of the team, and someone will reach out to you if you need any additional information. One additional thing I would kind of like to promo the next training coming up at 2:30. We're going to go over more details about working together, including another way to access the files that are stored in Teams. So I would invite everyone back to the 2:30 training. So that's it for me. Diane, Ryan, you have anything else?
We just had a great question from Donna, so let me answer that one verbally. Folks can always join a Teams meeting via the internet. We suggest either using Edge or a Chrome browser. IE is a little old. They can also download the Teams app, and you can just go for that at office.com and access it. And you can always access your obviously internal Teams and Outlook and everything from going to office.com and logging in as yourselves into the JJC portal. So hopefully that answers that question.
So just taking a look at the Q&A section here, it looks like we don't have too many further questions.
Oh, I see one here. If you're practicing and recording a test meeting, can you delete it so it's not on the team list for access? And the answer is yes, you absolutely can. So I'd like to thank everybody for joining, and if you're coming back for collaboration, that's at 2:30.
Indeed. Thank you again for attending, everyone, and have an excellent afternoon, and we will speak to many of you again soon.